Marcus Lewis had always been told he saw the world differently. Born and raised in a bustling working-class neighborhood, he spent his childhood sketching the vibrancy of his surroundings. To Marcus, the cracked sidewalks were canvases of untold stories, and the graffiti on alley walls were not acts of defiance, but expressions of raw, unfiltered creativity. His mother, a nurse who worked double shifts to make ends meet, would often find her son sitting at their small dining table, sketching for hours on end. Though money was tight, she always found a way to supply him with pencils, crayons, and scraps of paper, fostering his natural talent and encouraging his dreams. By the time Marcus reached high school, his talent had outgrown the confines of his modest neighborhood. His art teacher, Mr. Grayson, recognized his potential and often stayed after school to mentor him. "You've got something special, Marcus," Mr. Grayson would say, handing back another assignment that left him in awe. "But talent isn't enough. You've got to fight for your space in the world." These words stuck with Marcus, though he had no idea how prophetic they would become. As Marcus grew older, his art matured. He began drawing inspiration from his identity as a black man and his community. His work reflected the struggles, joys, and histories of African and urban culture. A painting of a black woman with a halo of cotton blossoms and fireflies spoke of resilience. A mural depicting young children playing amid city skyscrapers illustrated innocence amidst chaos. Every stroke, every hue, carried a message, bold, unapologetic, and deeply rooted in the stories he had grown up hearing and living. However, talent and vision didn't equate to opportunity. Marcus quickly discovered the harsh reality of the art world, a domain overwhelmingly dominated by wealthy gatekeepers who often decided whose voices deserved to be amplified. He attended open calls and submitted his portfolio to countless galleries, only to be met with rejection after rejection. Some were polite, offering vague platitudes about his work not fitting their current collection. Others were blunt, stating outright that his pieces lacked the commercial appeal their clientele preferred. The undercurrent was clear: his art, as powerful and evocative as it was, didn't align with the tastes of the affluent elite who frequented their galleries. Still, Marcus refused to be deterred. He believed in the power of his work and the importance of the stories he told. He doubled down, experimenting with new mediums and styles while staying true to his roots. He created pieces that incorporated found objects, broken mirrors, discarded shoes, shattered glass from car windows, transforming them into poignant reflections of systemic inequality and the resilience of his community. His art began to gain attention locally, with murals adorning community centers and a few features in grassroots exhibitions. But the dream of breaking into the elite art world still felt out of reach. One crisp autumn morning, while scrolling through his phone, Marcus came across an ad for an upscale gallery in the heart of the city. The Garrison Gallery was known for launching the careers of high-profile artists and boasted a client list that read like a who's who of the art world. They were hosting an open house event, inviting artists to bring their portfolios and mingle with gallery representatives. For Marcus, this felt like a sign, an opportunity he couldn't ignore. He spent the next 2 weeks meticulously curating his portfolio, choosing pieces that best showcased his evolution as an artist. Each selection carried a story, from his earliest works to his latest installations. He rehearsed his pitch in front of the mirror, imagining himself standing confidently before gallery curators and patrons. He even updated his wardrobe, opting for a sharp blazer and polished shoes that projected both professionalism and a creative edge. On the day of the event, Marcus's heart pounded as he approached the gallery's grand entrance. The Garrison Gallery was a world away from the graffiti-covered walls of his neighborhood. Its exterior gleamed with sleek modernity, while the faint glow of chandeliers spilled onto the sidewalk through tall glass windows. As he stepped inside, the contrast was striking. The air buzzed with conversations carried out in polished tones. The walls were adorned with avant-garde pieces, minimalist sculptures, abstract paintings with astronomical price tags, and installations that felt more conceptual than tangible. Marcus took a deep breath and walked in, his portfolio clutched tightly in his hand. He knew the odds were stacked against him. He was a young, black artist from a working-class background, stepping into a world that often prized exclusivity over inclusivity. But he also knew that his art had the power to challenge perceptions and ignite conversations. As he looked around the room, filled with hope and cautious optimism, Marcus vowed to make this moment count. For himself, for his community, and for the countless untold stories that deserved to be seen. Marcus stepped into the gallery, his heart thumping with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The Garrison Gallery was everything he had imagined, an architectural marvel, with high ceilings that seemed to stretch into infinity and walls gleaming white, like the blank canvas of a future he hoped to inhabit. The lighting was soft but purposeful, spotlighting the works of artists whose names Marcus had only heard whispered in the art circles. The polished floors reflected his every move, a silent reminder of how out of place he felt in this world of glass and glamour. As he made his way further into the gallery, he couldn't help but feel the weight of his own presence, as though his every step echoed too loudly in the silence of this opulent space. The art on the walls seemed foreign to him, mostly abstract, minimalist pieces that did little to stir his soul. He found himself drawn to one painting that depicted a lone figure lost in a sea of dark colors, but even then, he couldn't shake the sense that he didn't belong here. His clothes, though freshly pressed, felt insufficient next to the sharply tailored suits and polished designer dresses of the other guests. The scent of expensive perfumes mixed with the subtle undertone of old money, and for a moment, Marcus felt himself shrinking into the background, his presence almost invisible amidst the glittering crowd. It was then that he saw her, Ms. Charlotte Daniels, the owner of the gallery. She was a striking figure, with platinum blonde hair swept into a flawless updo and a tailored black dress that seemed to absorb all the light around her. Her eyes were a pale blue, cold and calculating, like a woman accustomed to power and privilege. She stood at the center of the room, her gaze flitting over the guests, a slight, almost imperceptible smile playing at the corners of her lips. Her air was one of quiet authority, like someone who could decide the fate of an artist with a single glance. Marcus hesitated, his nerves buzzing in his chest. He had rehearsed what he was going to say, but now that the moment was here, his words seemed to falter. It took all his courage to walk up to her. "Excuse me, Ms. Daniels," he said, trying to steady his voice. "My name is Marcus Lewis. I'm an artist, and I have a portfolio I'd like to share with you. I believe my work might resonate with your gallery's vision." Ms. Daniels didn't even look up at him right away. She glanced over her shoulder, her eyes scanning the room before her gaze finally landed on him. There was a flicker of something, amusement? Disdain, before her lips parted to speak. "Marcus Lewis," she repeated, as if tasting the name, her voice dripping with condescension. What an interesting choice for a name. Her tone wasn't exactly kind, but it was filled with a kind of forced politeness that made Marcus feel like he was already beneath her. "And what exactly do you do, Mr. Lewis? What kind of art do you create?" Marcus swallowed, trying to shake off the sting in her words. "I create works that reflect African and urban culture, drawing from my own experiences growing up in the city," he explained, his voice gaining strength despite the creeping doubt that began to cloud his mind. "My pieces are meant to spark conversation about identity, resilience, and the complexities of race and class." Ms. Daniels's lips curled into a slight smile, but it wasn't a smile of appreciation, it was more like a smirk. "I see," she said, her tone indifferent. "How quaint. Urban culture, you say?" She raised an eyebrow, her gaze lingering on Marcus's appearance as though assessing him like an object. "And do you think people who come to galleries like mine are really interested in that kind of thing? They prefer something a bit more sophisticated." Marcus felt a flush of heat rise to his cheeks, the sting of her words cutting deeper than he expected. He glanced down at himself, the simple button-up shirt, dark jeans, and the black jacket that had seemed so professional when he left his apartment that morning. He was aware of the way Ms. Daniels was looking at him, and it was clear she wasn't seeing a serious artist, but rather, a kid from the wrong side of the tracks who had no business in this world. "Let me see your portfolio," she said abruptly, a gesture dismissing him without interest. He handed it over, trying to keep his hand steady. Ms. Daniels barely flipped through the pages, each turn of the page quicker than the last. Her eyes skimmed over the pieces as though they were beneath her attention, the smallest hint of a scoff escaping her lips after each one. "I suppose these are fine for what they are," she said, the words dripping with a kind of dismissive finality. "But the thing is, dear, you see, we curate work for a very specific clientele. People who understand art in its more elevated forms. What you brought here, well, it's not exactly what we look for." Marcus's heart sank. The weight of her words crushed him, each syllable striking like a blow to his confidence. He had known that this wouldn't be easy, but he had hoped for more than this condescension, this mockery. But before he could even respond, one of the gallery staff members, a tall man with sharp features and a bored expression, stepped forward. "Maybe if he'd done something a bit more, modern," he said with a smirk, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "maybe we could consider it. But it's not even avant-garde. Just typical." Another staff member, a woman with perfectly styled hair and a look of quiet disdain, joined in. "Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it's important to him, but it just doesn't feel, relevant. Don't you think?" Marcus felt his stomach tighten. The voices, the mocking tones, the dismissive glances, each one eroded his spirit, piece by piece. He had faced rejection before, but this was different. This wasn't just rejection, it was ridicule. His work wasn't just dismissed, it was belittled. For a moment, he stood frozen, the room spinning around him. He had dreamed of this moment, of walking into a gallery like this and being taken seriously. But now, all he could feel was the weight of their judgment. I understand," Marcus said quietly, his voice trembling with a mix of hurt and frustration. He could feel his palms sweating as he took a step back, his portfolio clutched to his chest. "Thank you for your time." As he turned to leave, he could hear Ms. Daniels's voice trailing behind him. "Don't let us stop you, Mr. Lewis," she called out in a tone that made it clear she couldn't care less. "There's always another gallery for people like you." The words stung, but something inside Marcus snapped. He knew this wasn't the end. This wasn't where his journey would stop. He wasn't going to let the mockery of these people define his worth. He walked out of the gallery, feeling the weight of their dismissal behind him, but with each step, his resolve hardened. He was going to prove them wrong. He was going to show them that his art mattered, that his voice had value, and that no amount of elitism or privilege could silence the truth he painted on every canvas. As he stepped out into the cool air of the city, Marcus felt a surge of determination flood through him. He might have been humiliated today, but this setback would only fuel his drive. His work, his story, deserved to be heard, and he would make sure it would be, no matter the cost. The weeks that followed Marcus's encounter at the Garrison Gallery were a blur of rejection and self-doubt. He spent countless hours in his small studio, working late into the night, pouring all his frustrations and disappointments into new pieces. The sting of Ms. Daniels's words still lingered in his mind, but the fire that had ignited in him during his departure from the gallery only grew stronger. Marcus was determined to prove that his art had value, not for the wealthy patrons of exclusive galleries, but for the people, his community, his culture, and himself. One evening, as Marcus was preparing for yet another local art event, an exhibition at a nearby community center, he received a message that would change the trajectory of his career. It wasn't an email from a curator, nor was it an invitation from another gallery. Instead, it was a phone call, a rather unexpected one, from an older man with a rich, deep voice that commanded attention from the moment he spoke. "Is this Marcus Lewis, the artist?" the voice asked, a touch of curiosity but also respect underlying his words. "Yes, this is Marcus." "Who's calling?" Marcus replied, wondering if this was some sort of scam or a prank. "My name is Harold Bennett. I'm an art collector, though, I suppose, I'm more than that. I've been following your work for a while now, and I was quite impressed with what I saw at the community event last weekend. You're doing something different. Something important. I'd like to talk." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't the type of call he had expected, but in that moment, he knew that something significant was unfolding. He had heard of Harold Bennett, of course. Bennett was a legendary figure in the art world, an older man who had made his fortune in the business world but had long since transitioned into art collection and patronage. He had a reputation for spotting untapped talent and was known for helping emerging artists find their way into the limelight. The fact that Bennett was calling him, after everything that had happened, was nothing short of a miracle. They arranged to meet the following evening at a quiet cafe near Marcus's studio. When Marcus arrived, he immediately spotted Mr. Bennett sitting at a corner table, his appearance fitting the description Marcus had heard, dapper in a well-tailored suit, with gray hair neatly combed and sharp blue eyes that seemed to see straight through you. Bennett's presence was both commanding and welcoming, like the kind of man who knew the worth of things before anyone else did. Marcus took a deep breath and approached the table, feeling a sudden wave of nerves. He had rehearsed for this moment in his mind 100 times, but now that it was real, he was unsure of what to say. Harold Bennett rose to greet him, offering a firm handshake, and gestured for him to sit. "Marcus, it's a pleasure to finally meet you," Bennett said warmly, his voice gravelly but kind. "I must admit, I don't usually frequent community events, but I happened to be passing through that particular exhibition, and I was immediately struck by your work. There's a rawness to it, a truthfulness that I rarely see in young artists today." Marcus blinked, taken aback by the compliment. He had expected the usual pleasantries, the kind of vague praise that often came from those who had no intention of taking a genuine interest. But Bennett's words felt different, sincere, thoughtful, and grounded in something deeper than surface-level flattery. I appreciate that," Marcus replied, still trying to process the weight of the situation. "It's always been my goal to create art that speaks to people, that tells the stories of my community, my heritage. I've had my share of challenges getting people to understand it, though." Bennett chuckled softly, his eyes twinkling with an understanding that was hard to place. "Ah, yes. The art world can be a cold place for those who aren't born into it. But that's where I come in," he said, his voice dropping slightly, as if sharing a secret. "I've spent my life collecting art, not just for the investment, but for the stories and the messages they carry. I see potential in you, Marcus. I see something rare." Marcus's heart raced as Bennett continued, outlining his vision for a partnership, one where he would act as a mentor, using his vast network to help Marcus navigate the complexities of the art world. It wasn't just about exposure, though. Bennett was offering something much more valuable: guidance. He promised to introduce Marcus to influential critics, curators, and other collectors, people who could see beyond the surface and understand the essence of his work. He spoke of art fairs, prestigious events where artists were given a platform to showcase their talents to the world. For the first time in a long time, Marcus felt a sense of hope swell within him. This was an opportunity to finally be seen, not just for the person he was, but for the artist he had always dreamed of becoming. "I'll help you, Marcus," Bennett said, his voice firm with resolve. "But it's up to you to take this seriously, to push yourself beyond what you think you're capable of. The world is ready for your art, but you need to be ready for it too." Over the next few months, Marcus's life changed in ways he hadn't thought possible. With Bennett's guidance, he started refining his craft even further, pushing boundaries he had once thought unreachable. He began experimenting with larger canvases, blending vibrant colors with striking textures, and incorporating even more elements from his urban surroundings. Bennett introduced him to other artists, some established, others just beginning their journeys, who shared their experiences and advice, each conversation opening new doors and shedding light on the intricacies of the art world. But it wasn't just about the art. Bennett taught Marcus how to present himself, how to articulate the ideas behind his work in a way that could engage not only collectors but also critics and curators. He helped Marcus build his brand, guiding him through the business side of art, pricing his pieces, managing commissions, and leveraging his growing reputation. It wasn't easy, and there were times when Marcus doubted himself, feeling like he was pretending to be someone he wasn't. But Bennett's unshakable belief in him kept him moving forward, step by step. Then came the invitation that would mark a turning point in Marcus's career. It was an email from one of the most prestigious art fairs in the country, the annual New Visions Art Fair. It was a platform known for launching the careers of many successful contemporary artists. The email was short, but its message was clear: Marcus's work had been selected to be part of the event. His heart soared as he read through the details. This was the kind of exposure he had dreamed of since his early days of sketching in his neighborhood. With Bennett's help, Marcus carefully curated a collection of his most powerful pieces for the fair. The night of the opening, the atmosphere was electric, filled with collectors, critics, and influencers who milled about, discussing the works on display with fervor. Marcus stood in the corner, quietly observing, his nerves a ball of tension in his stomach. But as the evening wore on, he began to notice something remarkable. People were drawn to his work. They lingered before his canvases, their conversations shifting from the superficial to the meaningful. He overheard a critic commenting on the way his pieces conveyed both vulnerability and strength, while a well-known collector stopped by to ask about purchasing one of his works. By the end of the night, Marcus had sold several pieces, and the buzz around his art was growing louder. Critics began to take note, writing glowing reviews that praised the authenticity of his work and its ability to capture the complexities of race, class, and identity. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt like his voice was being heard, not just in his community, but on a larger, more prestigious scale. The success didn't stop there. Over the next few months, Marcus's name began to circulate in the art world. He was invited to exhibit at other renowned galleries, and his work was featured in high-profile publications. With each new opportunity, Marcus gained not only confidence but financial success as well. The dream of becoming a respected artist, once distant and improbable, was now within reach. But through it all, Marcus never lost sight of what truly mattered: his art, his community, and his story. Though his name was gaining recognition, he remained grounded, always staying true to the narratives he had always sought to tell. With Harold Bennett by his side, Marcus had found the mentorship he needed to navigate the complexities of the art world, but more importantly, he had found the courage to remain authentic in the face of a system that often sought to silence voices like his. The road had been long, filled with setbacks, but Marcus had risen, no longer the struggling artist from the streets, but a force in the art world, carving out his own space and proving that true talent, no matter its origins, could not be ignored. In the months following his breakthrough at the New Visions Art Fair, Marcus's work took on a life of its own. What had once been a deeply personal reflection of his life, his heritage, and his identity, now resonated with a broader audience, becoming a symbol of resilience, cultural pride, and authenticity. The themes he had explored in his pieces, race, class, and the experiences of Black and urban communities, were no longer confined to niche circles or marginalized spaces. They had tapped into something larger, something universal. As critics, collectors, and patrons of the art world began to see the depth of Marcus's work, his art became an emblem of strength for people who, like him, had long been ignored or dismissed. His reputation quickly spread. Major galleries began to approach him for exclusive exhibitions, and some of the most prestigious museums in the country expressed interest in showcasing his work in permanent collections. His pieces were featured in the contemporary art wing of the Metropolitan Museum, and his name was now spoken with reverence in the same circles that had once ignored him. Internationally renowned art critics praised his work for its boldness and authenticity, hailing him as a revolutionary artist for the new generation. The media dubbed him the voice of urban art, a title that both humbled and empowered him. He had, in a sense, become a living testament to the power of art to challenge societal norms and transcend boundaries. But with this new level of fame came a drastic transformation in Marcus's life. Wealth and recognition began to flow in abundance. His work sold for prices he had once only dreamed of, and the checks that arrived in his mailbox were no longer just enough to cover rent and studio supplies. They were substantial, life-changing sums. Marcus's modest apartment was soon replaced by a spacious loft in a trendy neighborhood, and the car he had once driven, an old, reliable sedan, was swapped for a sleek luxury vehicle. His wardrobe now featured designer suits and tailored shirts, items that once seemed foreign to him but now fit seamlessly into his new lifestyle. However, as the money and accolades piled up, Marcus remained grounded. He never forgot where he came from or the struggle it had taken to get to where he was. He refused to be defined by his wealth or by the labels the art world now placed on him. Instead, he used his newfound success as a platform to elevate others, particularly those from marginalized backgrounds who had not had the same opportunities he had. He became a fierce advocate for underrepresented artists, mentoring young talents and using his connections to get them the exposure they deserved. He started hosting workshops and community events where aspiring artists could showcase their work without the fear of being turned away by elitist gatekeepers. Through these efforts, Marcus began to build a legacy that was not just about his own rise to prominence, but about uplifting those who had been overlooked by the mainstream art world. He launched a foundation aimed at providing scholarships and resources for young Black and urban artists, ensuring that the next generation of creatives would have the tools they needed to succeed. To Marcus, success was no longer measured by personal gain, but by how much he could give back to the community that had shaped him. But as the world around him seemed to fall into place, Marcus's thoughts turned toward a different kind of future, one that was not only about artistic triumphs but about legacy and ownership. He had already begun to invest in real estate, buying up properties in emerging neighborhoods that he believed had untapped potential. What had started as a modest investment in a few buildings soon grew into a thriving portfolio. Marcus understood the value of property, not just as an investment but as a tool for community development. He worked tirelessly to restore buildings, turning dilapidated spaces into affordable housing, cultural hubs, and local businesses that reflected the vibrancy of the neighborhoods they served. Alongside his real estate ventures, Marcus began acquiring art galleries. He understood that owning these spaces would allow him not only to continue showcasing his own work, but also to give other artists, especially those like him, with backgrounds that were often overlooked, a platform to be seen and heard. His first acquisition was a small gallery on the outskirts of the city, a humble space that he transformed into a thriving center for contemporary art. It wasn't long before other galleries began reaching out to him, recognizing the value of his vision and his ability to turn spaces into cultural sanctuaries. Each gallery he owned became a testament to his belief that art should be for everyone, not just the elite. But among the galleries he had his eye on, one stood out in particular, the very same gallery where he had been humiliated just a few years earlier. The Garrison Gallery. The place that had dismissed him, laughed at his work, and ridiculed his very existence in the art world. The thought of purchasing that gallery had always lingered in the back of Marcus's mind, but as his success continued to grow, the idea began to take root. He had the resources now, the connections, and the leverage to make it happen. He had always known that his journey wasn't just about proving himself to others, it was about reclaiming the power that had been denied to him. Purchasing the Garrison Gallery would be more than just a business acquisition, it would be an act of defiance, a symbolic taking back of what had once been denied him. It would serve as a reminder that no one, not even the gatekeepers of the art world, could dictate the worth of his voice, his art, or his legacy. Marcus began researching the gallery's financials, leveraging his network of influential contacts to learn more about its ownership and potential for acquisition. As he navigated the legal and business intricacies of such a high-profile transaction, the weight of what he was about to do hit him. This wasn't just about money. This was about rewriting the narrative, about claiming his rightful place in the world of art and showing that his success wasn't just a fluke, it was earned. He imagined what it would be like to walk through the doors of the Garrison Gallery, now his own, and look at the faces of the people who had once mocked him. He imagined hosting exhibitions there, showcasing not only his own work but the works of other artists who had been told they didn't belong. He would transform the space, not just with his art but with his vision, a space where authenticity, creativity, and resilience would be celebrated above all else. When the deal was finally sealed, Marcus stood outside the gallery's imposing facade, staring up at the building that had once been a symbol of everything he couldn't have. Now, it was a symbol of everything he had fought for, and won. In the months that followed, the Garrison Gallery underwent a complete transformation. The once staid and elitist space was now a vibrant, inclusive hub for contemporary art, one that reflected Marcus's commitment to showcasing the diversity and richness of the art world. His first exhibition there featured works by artists from backgrounds similar to his own, those whose voices had been marginalized and ignored. The opening night was a celebration of resilience, unity, and creativity, and it attracted a new kind of crowd, one that embraced the power of art to tell untold stories and break down barriers. As the gallery thrived under his leadership, Marcus continued to invest in the future, using his wealth and influence to empower those who had been overlooked. He didn't just want to be remembered for his art, he wanted to be remembered for the way he reshaped the art world itself, making it a place where all voices, regardless of background, were welcomed and celebrated. And as he stood before a new generation of artists, those who had once been in his shoes, Marcus knew that his journey had only just begun. The art world, once a place of exclusion, was now his to shape, and he would ensure that it would never be the same again. It had been years since Marcus had walked through the doors of the Garrison Gallery, but every detail of that humiliating day was still fresh in his mind. The dismissive tone of Ms. Charlotte Daniels, the cold glances from her staff, and the way they had all looked at him, as though he was nothing more than a fleeting curiosity, a boy from the wrong side of town with delusions of grandeur. He had left that day, humiliated but determined, vowing that he would one day return, not as an aspiring artist seeking validation, but as someone with the power to shape the art world on his own terms. Now, as he stood in front of the gleaming facade of the Garrison Gallery, the weight of his success felt like a distant echo of his former self. Marcus had long since surpassed the self-doubt that had plagued him in his earlier years. The struggle to be seen, to be heard, to be understood, was over. His rise had been nothing short of meteoric, and the art world now knew his name. He was no longer the kid who had been rejected and ridiculed, he was a respected, celebrated figure. But today was about more than just his art. Today, he was here to take control of his destiny and, in doing so, turn the tables on the very people who had once dismissed him. Marcus had made his fortune, not just through his art, but through shrewd investments, including the acquisition of galleries, properties, and businesses. He had become a force in the world of real estate and art, with a vision that extended far beyond the confines of his own success. But there was one thing he had always wanted to do, to own the Garrison Gallery. It wasn't just about the acquisition, it was about taking back what was rightfully his, about proving that the art world could be reshaped, not just by those with the wealth and power to manipulate it, but by those who had been marginalized and excluded for far too long. As he entered the gallery, the familiar air of exclusivity and privilege hung in the space. The polished floors reflected the sleek, modern sculptures that adorned the walls, the soft lighting highlighting the works of established artists whose names were recognized the world over. The gallery was as pristine as ever, its sterile elegance a far cry from the vibrant, inclusive spaces Marcus had created in the other galleries he had acquired. But today, it would be different. He was met by a young receptionist, whose eyes widened the moment she saw him. He was dressed in a sharp, tailored suit, exuding the kind of confidence that only came with years of hard-earned success. His presence was commanding, and though the receptionist did not know who he was, she could tell he was someone important. "Good afternoon, sir," she greeted him politely, offering a smile. "How can I assist you today?" "I'm here to see Ms. Daniels," Marcus said, his voice smooth, yet laced with a quiet intensity. The receptionist's smile faltered just a fraction, her eyebrows furrowing in confusion. She was accustomed to seeing the gallery's usual clientele, well-dressed patrons, affluent collectors, and distinguished critics, but this man was different. He didn't fit the mold of the typical gallery visitor. Yet, she nodded and, without hesitation, picked up the phone to make the call. Within moments, Ms. Daniels appeared, as immaculate and poised as ever, though her face seemed to momentarily register a flash of recognition upon seeing Marcus standing in the entryway. She didn't let it show, though, masking her thoughts with a practiced smile. "Ah, welcome," she said, her voice warm but distant. "How can I help you?" Marcus watched her for a beat, feeling the years of humiliation churn in his chest. She stood before him, the same woman who had mocked him and dismissed his work like it was nothing more than a triviality. But now, she had no idea who he truly was. He decided to let her enjoy the moment of superiority a little longer, just long enough for the revelation to hit her like a thunderclap. "I'm here because I'm interested in purchasing the gallery," Marcus said, his words casual but carrying a weight that immediately shifted the atmosphere. Ms. Daniels blinked, clearly caught off guard. Her smile faltered, replaced by a mask of polite curiosity. "I'm sorry, I think there's been some misunderstanding. This gallery is not for sale." Marcus's lips curled into a small smile. "Actually, it is. You see, I'm quite familiar with the inner workings of this place. And I've already come to an agreement with your current owners." Her face betrayed no recognition yet, but Marcus could tell that her mind was working overtime, trying to place him. He let the silence hang in the air for a moment before revealing the truth. "My name is Marcus Lewis. You may remember me from a few years ago," he said, his voice quiet but steady, as though he was speaking not to her, but to a much larger audience. "I came to your gallery with a portfolio of my work, hoping to be taken seriously. But you and your staff saw fit to mock me, to dismiss my art, to dismiss me. You told me my work wasn't sophisticated enough, that it didn't fit into your vision." The color drained from Ms. Daniels's face as the weight of his words sank in. She stared at him, speechless for a moment, as realization dawned on her. The casual, polite facade she had maintained for so long began to crack, revealing the anxiety beneath it. This was not the young, hungry artist she had dismissed years ago. This was someone with power, with influence, someone who had every right to be standing here today. I didn't realize," she began, her voice faltering, but Marcus held up his hand, signaling for her to stop. "No need to explain," he said, his voice calm but tinged with an edge. "I'm not here for an apology. I'm here because I'm taking ownership of what's mine." Ms. Daniels's lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but the words died in her throat. She had built her reputation by cultivating a space that catered to the elite, to the wealthy patrons who believed themselves to be the arbiters of taste and culture. She had become a gatekeeper, a symbol of the old, exclusive art world, one that Marcus had no intention of being a part of. He would remake it in his own image, one that was inclusive, diverse, and grounded in authenticity. "I've already signed the papers, Ms. Daniels," Marcus continued, his gaze unwavering. "This gallery is mine now. And I intend to turn it into something completely different. A place where artists like me, and many others who've been ignored and dismissed, will finally have a chance to be seen. A place where diversity and inclusion are more than just buzzwords. A place where true art can flourish, no matter who the artist is or where they come from." Ms. Daniels stood frozen, her mind racing as she processed the reality of what was unfolding. The Garrison Gallery, the very institution she had spent years building, was slipping through her fingers. It had been her symbol of power, her crown jewel in the world of high art. But now, it would be forever linked to the man she had so callously dismissed, the man who had built a legacy of his own and was now taking what was rightfully his. Marcus stepped toward her, his posture proud but not arrogant. "You see, Ms. Daniels, I don't need your approval. I never did. And now, I'm going to make sure that this space is one where artists like me, artists with stories that matter, have a platform to shine." He turned toward the receptionist, who had been silently observing the exchange. "I'll be overseeing the transformation of this gallery myself. You'll be hearing from my team soon about the upcoming changes." With those final words, Marcus turned and walked out of the Garrison Gallery, his footsteps echoing through the empty space. The world outside was waiting for him, waiting for the next chapter of his journey to unfold. And as he left the gallery behind, he knew that this was only the beginning. Over the following months, Marcus poured his energy into the transformation of the Garrison Gallery. He stripped away the elitism and exclusivity, replacing it with a welcoming atmosphere that celebrated artists from all walks of life. He introduced new exhibitions featuring underrepresented artists, with a focus on marginalized communities, urban culture, and stories of resilience. The gallery quickly became a beacon of diversity in the art world, a place where authenticity was valued above all else. Ms. Daniels, meanwhile, watched from the sidelines as the gallery she had once owned was remade in Marcus's image. It was a humbling experience for her, one that would stay with her for the rest of her life. The lesson was clear: no matter how high the gates you build, no matter how exclusive your world may seem, there will always be someone who can break through them and claim what is rightfully theirs. And for Marcus, that moment had arrived.